there's never a boring day, and I don't care who you are and what your job is in our company. You are always doing something different.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with Alison Carey-Lynch, Vice President of Carey Manufacturing. Hey, Alison, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Second time we're having somebody on from Carey Manufacturing, but it's been a few years. So let's start with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So we make latches, catches, handles, spacers, standoffs, basically all sorts of fasteners. And we make it because somebody's got to make the parts that nobody thinks about that literally hold the world together.
Hold the world together and help you open things.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep it open, keep it closed.
Keep it open, keep it closed. Yeah, actually, so let's just talk about that really quick, just in case people don't understand what a catch, a latch, or a handle is. So maybe just help educate the audience. Like, where would someone see a product that you guys make potentially?
So the parts that you make, you'll kind of see all over. A lot of them you'll actually see, and a lot of them you won't. The basic one I kind of tell people is if you go to the doctor's office, there's usually cabinetry on the side, and they have those very simple handles on those. We make those. If you open let's say a med kit, for example, those latches that you throw over and snap into place, we make those. We have a hasp line where if you're opening a barn door or something like that, where those little hinges that you fold over and then put a padlock on, we make those.
Oh, wow.
And we also make little parts that separate things like circuit boards and I don't even know what else because frankly they don't tell us.
But they come in and you make them. And so when we think about, there's like lots of like little parts. So when we think about that, how many different parts do you guys make?
So we have a catalog of over 700,000 different SKUs, but every year we sell about 10 to 15,000 unique part numbers to all sorts of different industries. So we work across a lot of industries. So commercial, aerospace, defense, medical, transportation, and other industries we probably don't even have any idea. So
because you're selling them through distribution, or is that's
we
why
primarily sell through distribution? Yeah.
So you don't always know who the end customers.
No.
So making like 15,000 sort of unique part numbers seems like that'd be a challenge from a manufacturing standpoint.
I mean, when you say it, yeah, but it's just something we've always kind of known, so it doesn't really seem like a challenge. I think, we're really interesting because we do actually do pretty small part runs. Our minimum order requirement is 50 pieces in order to set up to do a run. But when we do that, because we're a catalog house, we have years of data for how much we sell for these parts. So we can actually set up to run slightly longer runs. So our average run is anywhere from 150 to like maybe 2,000 pieces. And we have a number of different machines, so we tend to set them up to run the same type and size or shape of material. So we could do a 1/4-inch hex aluminum on one machine, and we'll run every order we have in our production schedule before we break it down to set something else up.
Got it. So sort of you figure out a way to sort of streamline what sort of seems like a huge variation, but actually it's just slight variations off a different theme. So you kind of figure out how to streamline it.
Exactly. We'll make the same part, and it could be anywhere from 1/8 of an inch up until 5-10 inches long. But it's all basically just slightly different variations in exactly the same machine.
Same machine, yeah. Got it. Yeah, it's like super complicated from the outside, but it sounds like you guys got it all figured out. So let's just spend a little bit of time on the background. I definitely want to talk about your relationship with the Chief Manufacturing Officer, which is like multifaceted. But just give some background about yourself. Like, Alison, how did you get involved in Carey Manufacturing?
Well, I am a product of nepotism. My other title is actually COO, Child of Owner. So I was born into the business. I actually started when I was about 2 weeks old. My mom started to bring me in. But for my background, I actually went to Babson College, and then when I graduated from there, I ended up in a sales position. I started out, this is going to date me a little bit, selling yellow page ads in college phone books. So I did that for a few years, and then actually was a corporate recruiter in New York. And then when I decided I kind of wanted to do something different, my parents basically said, well, why don't you come do some production planning for us while you figure out what you want to do? And 10 years later, here I am. So that's kind of how I ended up in the business. I never really wanted to be a part of it, but honestly, I'm so glad it worked out this way. It's been wonderful.
Do you think it was super helpful for you to have kind of had those completely different, unique experiences that would seemingly be unrelated to what you're doing today? I mean, it would hard to see a connection between Yellow Page ads and vice president of a manufacturing company, or even maybe executive recruiting. But do you see sort of a connection on those experiences that you kind of lean on a daily basis?
There really are, because, I come in with an outside perspective. A lot of the people that work there are either, career manufacturers or engineers or people who are just kind of that technical side of things. So I come in with just different experience, and the companies that I worked for before gave me exposure to a lot of different industries, a lot of different type of people. And it gave me some kind of business perspective from the outside that I think adds a little something, different.
Yeah, like a little bit of a variety, spice of life kind of a thing. Gives you a different little perspective on that.
Exactly.
So in your role, vice president, what do you kind of do for the company?
So I do a lot of different things. I think one of the things about being a small manufacturer and then also being, the part of the family is we kind of pick up wherever we need. So I've held a number of different roles. So I've done everything from production planning. I ran a production line. I ran the sales department for a while. Currently, I am actually doing purchasing, which I've done for the entire time I've been there, run the quality department, and I'm responsible for the outreach side of the business, meaning being involved in the different organizations, going and being essentially the kind of face of the company. I pretty much do whatever is asked of me. I've also do the recruiting, hence the background in that. When our HR retired, we kind of split their duties, and I took over the recruiting side of it, and somebody else took over the actual HR responsibilities. So I wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. So in your role, kind of like being the face of the organization, what is that like?
It is really, really fun. I had big shoes to fill because Paul is obviously the king of being, out there and being a big personality in the industry. So it's been very fun. It's been very interesting. It was incredibly intimidating at first because I was locked in the shop for 10 years. They didn't let me out. And, then all of a sudden I'm put in this very public-facing role, and Carey's been really well recognized in the state as a manufacturer for a long time. So it's been exciting. It's been a lot of learning, but I'm really, really excited with what the state's doing, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
So actually, you touched on Paul, so why don't we pivot over to that? I do want to come back to the outreach a little bit because I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned because so many people get stuck inside their four walls, and I think that's to their detriment. So we can kind of touch on that. But you referenced Paul. So who is this Paul that you speak of?
This is Paul Lavoie, our Chief Manufacturing Officer, and he was promoted to the position from General Manager at Carey. So, so I worked for him for, I think, 5 years prior to him.
Yeah, prior to that. And so kind of what was that like kind of working for him? Were you able to kind of glean some of the lessons learned?
It was so unbelievably valuable. He was very easily the best boss I ever worked for. And when he took the job as CMO, what I said to everybody is if he can do half for the state what he did for us, the state is in excellent hands, and I stand by that. He was really great at putting perspective into the business. It's hard when you work for your dad. And so he was really great at kind of being that buffer and helping us really kind of mature a little bit as a business. Has really great insight and incredible business knowledge. So
so he was the buffer between you and your dad.
He was the buffer. Let's be.
Yeah. And so it's nice to kind of have that experience and left a little bit of a void when he left that you've sort of stepped into.
Oh, his duties are split. I do the kind of outreach side of it, and then one of our chief engineers has now taken over as general manager. And so he's in charge of the day-to-day running and now working with my dad directly on a lot of that stuff. So
just going back to the kind of being the outreach and thinking about the importance of getting outside of your four walls, tell me how you think about that. Like how do you think about the importance and where do you invest that time and how do you determine if you're getting the return on that time?
It's kind of tricky because one of the things is, how do you measure the return on it? I'm going to be stepping into more of a business development role at some point. But it's really hard to measure what does this mean? The way we do it is we've always been involved. We do tons of shop tours. We've always been involved with AMEP and a lot of the different manufacturers. And for me, it's about developing the relationships and actually being able to shape the manufacturing community in the state. Being a participant, you have voice and you get to explain the frustrations and the things you want in your business. And I'm actually seeing some of the things that I'm talking about now starting to take shape kind of around the state with the different programs and things like that. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. And so you kind of have a long-term view on that investment at that time?
Yeah. And I think we've always kind of had that is we want to be members of the community. It's really important to be part of your own community and to make it be what you want, Yeah, that's kind of our long-term goal on that for sure.
And so what organizations are you a part of currently to kind of get that to happen?
I'm worried I'm going to forget somebody. So we are part of ManufactureCT, AMEP. We were on the I-4.0 working group. We work with, let me see, who else? We're part of SCMP. We're members of the Central Connecticut Chamber, the Middlesex Chamber, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of people, but Women in Manufacturing. So we're part of a lot of different organizations.
And so let's kind of run through a few of those. You had mentioned ManufactureCT. So tell us about kind of your involvement in that. And
so personally, I've helped out with the dinner for the past couple of years. And, the where I am involved with that is I recently just kind of show up to the events and network. I try to be a supporter as best I can. Also, anytime there's, a beer or wine involved, I'm always happy to be there. But it's really just about kind of networking and talking to people and hearing where their pain points are, where their successes are, and vice versa. I've gotten a lot from that community of companies that are in a similar position to us with the succession planning or similar but different types of businesses that really could benefit each other. We've had people come and visit our facilities that have given us quotes. And it's just that kind of general, again, sense, I know I keep saying this, but sense of community and sense of you're not alone. Because being a small business, you sometimes feel like you're operating without a net. And who do you go to ask for help? We've got cybersecurity coming and, where do we fit in this world and with the CMMC, certifications and how does that work and what does it look like and what have other people done? And it's just nice to kind of have a village.
Yeah, where you can feel like you've got somebody there that has been through what you're going through.
And vice versa.
Yes, correct.
Reshoring and all of the stuff that we've done, we're more than happy to share our story. So, it's good to be part of that.
Learn from other people's, not just their mistakes, but also from their successes. And I know you guys have been really participated with AMEP. So can you explain what AMEP is?
Yep. So AMEP is the kind of the Central Connecticut Regional Sector Partnership. So it's essentially a bunch of, manufacturers and then community organizations that get together and basically work on bettering the manufacturing community. I actually just had yesterday, our quarterly meeting was at Manchester High School, and there was 20 or 30 different people there, and we had about an hour and a half long meeting, took a tour of Manchester High's manufacturing facility, which is absolutely incredible.
Manchester High School has a manufacturing facility now?
They have a manufacturing program.
Wow.
But I think we went through, probably 5 or 6 different rooms from their actual manufacturing to their podcast room and newsroom to their auto shop, their robotics center. It was really exciting to see. And I'll be honest, I worked with Manchester High School this summer, and I had no idea that their program was this extensive and growing, which is incredible.
Really?
Yeah.
So kids are really kind of latching onto this, not to use the latch word, but yeah, exactly.
Hopefully they can handle it. They really seem to be. We did actually through AMEP, we did a training pathways program with them this summer, where myself, Ronnie from AccuTurn, and Adonica from LeGrand in West Hartford, we all set up this pilot program, went into their summer program, did a little bit of an intro into manufacturing, some resume building, a little bit of a metrology exercise. And then they actually the next day came and toured our facility. And the feedback that we got from students, the interest in manufacturing went up twofold from when we walked in the door to when, to the end of the thing. And it was only 2 days. It was probably, maybe 8 hours total of our time. But it was so well worth it that we're planning on doing another one, hopefully sometime this summer.
Wait, what was that called? The Pathways?
Training Pathways. It's a working group within the AMEP program.
Got it. So AMEP has a Training Pathways program?
They have there's a couple of different kind of volunteer groups. So there's Training Pathways, which I'm the lead of. There is Job Quality, and then there is, I believe it's Business Development, and I'm probably missing one, but hopefully I covered most of them.
And the Training Pathways is looking for what? For people who maybe aren't in manufacturing who are looking to get in there, or what is that all about?
It's about building awareness and working with basically getting students excited about manufacturing. So, growing up, at least when I grew up, it was you went to college or you were a failure. And, and then that's just such an unfortunate way to be because manufacturing and other trades are just so valuable. You can make such a great living, and without all of the student debt. That was one of the things I told the students was you could go to school and have up to $250,000 in debt when you leave, or you could go to MCC and take a 21-week course and then come out, get a job, have a house, have a car, and have no debt by the time your friends are graduating college, So it's a really, I don't know, it's just such an important area, and it's important that people are educated on it, students, parents, teachers, and kind of going back to elementary school even. It's important to kind of build that awareness in a way that I think, like my generation and the generations before me, we weren't kind of told that these were viable careers.
Yeah, if anything, maybe the total opposite, right? Like
Exactly.
not only did we not know it was viable, it was told don't even give it a shot.
Exactly.
And so have you found, it sounds like you've been finding people to be receptive. One of the things I've seen in my travels is if we get to the students, sometimes their parents still don't know. Are you able to kind of dig deeper to get past just the students so that they don't get excited, then go home and their parents like, no, pipe dream,
I think I see it shifting. I think the plan for us is ultimately to get there. I've heard many organizations, many school boards, people talking about this, getting to the parents, making sure that they are just as aware, because their kids, exactly what you say, their kids can be invested, but it'd be like going off to LA and becoming an actor. Like, what, are you crazy? So it is about that kind of long-term education. We actually did an event this winter with the Society of Women in Engineering, which is actually what we made that little thing for.
For those of you that aren't watching,
sorry.
no, it's okay. For those of you that are just listening, this is it's a rose carved out of metal, which is like pretty cool. That says Carey at the bottom, which is a gift. So thank you very much.
Very welcome. We gave it away as some swag for the kids, and those were girls ages like 8 to 13 that got to go around. A whole bunch of different manufacturers were there, and we each did an activity. And I just did a simple metrology activity with a couple of calipers and thread gauges, and these kids had a blast. They were shoving the thread gauges and holes. We had to recalibrate everything, but it was fine because everybody was having such a good time, and these kids were so excited about being in manufacturing and the idea of what could be done that it's worth it every chance you can do.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, look, we've got to start early, but are you guys doing anything? I mean, that's a long-term payoff, right? Elementary school for sure, high school maybe still, but a little bit. Mm-hmm. Are you doing anything like engaging maybe folks that are in career change opportunities? Like, is that an opportunity out there to engage folks that are maybe, in a retail job or a fast food job that maybe have an opportunity?
So we're not actively involved in promoting that, but our view on it is to absolutely participate in a ton of the different opportunities around the state. There's the makerspace. All the community colleges have these little programs. One of my coworkers teaches a 5-week program at Capitol Community College for getting people into manufacturing, and we've hired people out of that program with great success that were I don't know how old they are, but definitely at least in their 20s. So we're huge supporters of it. I'm also a big believer, and our company's a big believer, is we will hire anybody that has food service experience. We
Really?
take that as absolutely. To deal with the public, to deal with making orders for people. I don't care if it's a pizza place, if it's Dunkin' Donuts. Actually, our VP of operations it comes from a pizza background. And that is exactly what he says. The work ethic it takes to be successful in that type of business, and the flexibility in thinking is really valuable in the manufacturing community, because you're always thinking of how you're changing and how you have to approach ideas and problem solving in manufacturing.
Sure, yeah, and actually in food service, you are making something. Right?
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, literally. Oh, that's really interesting. So kind of thinking about connecting the dots, from your perspective, you were doing something totally different. Mm-hmm. You came in to do some production planning. So I'm just curious, I know it's been a decade, but do you remember what you thought it was going to be like when you were going in? I mean, I know you resisted it at first, but then you said you would do it. When you went in, was it sort of like love at first sight day one, or was it like, all right, whatever, I'm going to keep doing this, and then you found a passion?
I think a little bit of both. I really enjoyed the work. I'm a quality person. I like rules. I like structure. I like things to be kind of set up. And manufacturing, while it is creative, is also very structured. There's part numbers, there's processes, there's all of these things that need to be followed in order to make sure that you put good parts out to your customers. Even something simple like we do. It's really important that they're made correctly. So I think I fell in love with it pretty quickly, probably before I even realized that I did. I've also fallen out of love with it a few times, but it's always there.
It comes back.
It goes back and forth.
Anyone that's been in a long-term relationship knows what that's all about, right?
Exactly. It's a little Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. So the perspective from your end is sort of like you really fell in love with sort of a place for everything and everything in its place concept that manufacturing really has to embrace. Because to your point, like if your catch is off by just a little bit, it just won't close, right? I mean, there's a very small margin for error.
Exactly. And it's kind of like organized chaos. And I think it's really interesting to be part of this world. We had a customer come to us one time asking about a weight rating on a handle, and we don't do weight ratings. It's not the type of work that we do, but they didn't need anything official. They just wanted to make sure it wouldn't fail at 200 pounds. So we looked at one of our engineers and was like, how much do you weigh? And he was like, slightly over 200 pounds. So we hung the handle from a door, and we had our engineer hang from it, and we use the Victor weight rating, and it worked. But those are the types of things that come up all the time. Is like, we have a problem, we have to solve it. We don't need to pay somebody else to do this. How do you fix this problem? And I think it's really exciting. That's the kind of fun part of the organized chaos is exactly what I think manufacturing kind of is in a nutshell.
So after you've been through it and now you've been through the recruiting and you've seen what works and what doesn't work, is that kind of the number one thing you would say for people to really find this passion? Do you think it's really is appreciating that sort of organized chaos, like the idea of being creative, but creative within a very tight set of rules?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of putting it. It is about, it's about wanting to make things and wanting to do these things, but also knowing that you got to follow the rules, show up on time, do the things that you need to do. Yeah.
And because I think there's some people that probably would think of it as you just come in every day and you're just sort of doing the same thing. And so once you learn it, you just come in every day and it just becomes boring. But that doesn't sound like it at all.
Oh, no, absolutely not. There's never a boring day. And I don't care who you are and what your job is in our company, you are always doing something different. Listen, something breaks. A tool breaks, the machine goes down, or, let's say a material comes through and there's scratches on it. You have to you're constantly pivoting and figuring out what's going on. In addition, with our company, since we make so many different parts, you're always doing something different. There's always a different part coming off the line. You're not just sitting there setting up and running the same part over and over and over and over again for, a month. There's always that, at least where we are, every manufacturer is different, but you're going to have a lot of the same changes and a lot of the same kind of creative problem solving that needs to happen.
Yeah, there's not too many U.S. manufacturers that are doing like long runs of 10,000 whatevers, right?
Yeah.
Usually that's not being done here. We're doing more of the change stuff, I suppose.
Exactly.
What percentage, let me think of a little bit of a different way. You've come into the business. You talked about being like the child of the owner. Mm-hmm. So what did you have to do to sort of stand out, you think, and kind of earn your own stripes versus people just sort of thinking, oh, well, of course, Alison gets this job?
It was a lot. It took a really long time. And like I said, Paul was a huge, huge proponent in helping that happen, because there's a couple of things, right? So it's actually both of my parents work in the business. My mother and my father, they founded it together. Sorry, Mom.
Child of owners.
Child of owners, yes.
Yeah. Double the nepotism.
Exactly. And it took a long time to overcome that, because I'm coming in, and not only am I my parents' daughter, and that's seen by the company, but also by my parents. So you come in, and I started to try to make changes, and I started to try to make suggestions on how we can do things differently, and I was oftentimes met with resistance, and
both directions.
Oh. And it was really, really challenging. Or if my dad was, let's say, not in agreement with me on something, the other people that were on my level, or HR or controller, all of that, they're not going to side with me. They're going up against the boss. And it's true, because so there was a lot of resistance. And I don't want to say resistance to change. I just think, listen, you've got a 30-year-old coming in being like, well, you're doing this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. And you've been in business for 35 years. I get it. Right. But it took a long time. It took just, I think, a lot of just changes over time, and people realizing I wasn't just like a flash in the pan, and I really cared about this, and I wanted what's best for the company. And over time, things started to change. And, also, and for better or worse, being a woman in this business can be really, really difficult, in addition to being the child of the owner. You're oftentimes not, there's just a stigmatism with that.
Still.
It's
because I was going to ask you about that, because not only I was going to pivot there after sort of the child of the owner, because I do know that there has been some stuff. You did mention you participate in women in manufacturing, and you're out as the face of the company, and I was just curious your views on the women's side of it.
I think so. Our company is actually 40% women, and it is not by choice. I'd love to say that we had a vision plan. We just turned around one day and counted, and here we were. But it's
almost better that way, no?
It is, and especially for the type of work we do, where it's a lot of like small pieces and assembly and detail-oriented type of work. We love it. We love women.
Yeah. I guess what I meant, just to be clear on it, was like it's better that it wasn't planned in a vision, that it just sort of happened organically, and there didn't need to be a big plan if we just hired the best person for the job.
Exactly.
And it turns out, wow, we found out 40% of our staff is women. That's great.
And that's what we did. We always just hire the best person for the job. I don't care anything about your background or who you are or gender or anything. If you're the best person for the job, welcome. But I think being in manufacturing, it's definitely improved. I'm seeing so much more just women being trailblazers in the organization, in manufacturing on a state level. I think sometimes, you do deal a little bit with like the good old boys. Things have always been the way they've been. Sometimes it's not always as easy to be heard, but I think it's something that women just deal with in general in society. I don't necessarily know that I've been specifically targeted for that, but it is just kind of extra challenging sometimes to be heard.
And do you find that, like you mentioned, there's so many women in your company? I've actually seen just a huge number of women leaders in manufacturing. Many people from like next generation, ManufactureCT in particular, I feel has like a lot of women leaders in it.
It's definitely getting better, and I think that was kind of maybe some of the struggle I had was we were 40% women, but our front office was mostly male, and and then I'm stepping in and trying to make these changes, and and it was just falling on deaf ears, and that was frustrating, but also
part of how it goes.
Part of how it goes, and you just keep pushing, and then eventually, now I'm running things, and we're not by myself. With lots of, there's a team of us, but our top management team is 5 people. 2 of us are women, and I'm very happy with that. And the second person is my actually quality supervisor, Patricia, who I've looked right in the face and said, you are going to take over entirety of quality as soon as I can get you up to doing it. Because, you're so qualified, and we're all about promoting not only the best people, but women in particular too.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like you really feel like you've, despite whatever challenges you had, which I'm sure maybe part of it was being a woman, part of it was child of the owners, part of it is also
personality.
Listen, I can imagine coming in, late 20s, early 30s, thinking back to my time there, you got a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, probably thinking our ideas are always better. There's probably like an age resistance, like you touched on it, right? Listen, I've been here 30 years. I don't care who you are coming in here with all these great ideas. You sort of need to prove yourself, but it sounds like 10 years later, you've proven yourself. Those things tend to be more in the rearview mirror, and now you're just in it, getting it done.
Exactly. Definitely personality had a lot to do with it. In case you can't tell, I'm not exactly like a shrinking violet.
Which is probably, I would imagine, hugely to your advantage, because I think some of the reasons I see people not reach their potential is because they don't push through that resistance. And, I think I heard this saying when I was much younger that I've always thought about, which is persistence beats resistance. But you got to keep persisting.
Absolutely. And, it was easier for me to do it because, again, this was my family's company. And, sure, you want to fire me, I'm on your payroll one way or the other. So it did give me, there was that kind of security blanket to maybe push a little bit harder than I would have in a different place. But as an organization, we really try to make sure that everybody's heard. So it's actually a really important thing for us that nobody feels kind of that competition side of it. So, we do kind of stand up for ideas as an organization, maybe just not quite as yelly as I can be sometimes.
Well, I mean, you could say Carey's been in business, 42 years now?
42 years, yep.
42 years. So your dad's been at it quite a while.
Yes.
I mean, are you guys thinking about what Carey Manufacturing may look like in sort of the next iteration?
Yes, we are very, very early on in the talks for that. I think it's a really challenging thing because my parents built this business from basically nothing, and so this is their 5th child, essentially. So they're out there, and they built this up from everything. It's all they've known. It's what they've had their life around. Growing up, dinner conversations were about the business. It's so much so that my sister and I have a rule that we don't talk about work outside of work. I work with my brother-in-law, and people don't actually know that we work together most of the time until we mention it, because
Really?
we do not talk about it.
Don't talk about work.
We do not talk about work outside of work. But it's that, and it makes it really, really hard to kind of plan the next generation, because not only is it you're their baby, you're now passing it off to your child, who, no matter if your child is 40 or probably 60, my grandmother's 100, almost 101, and she still treats my mom, who's older
enough, yes,
like she's her daughter. Like, I've heard her scold, and so I think it's really difficult sometimes to put that trust in your child, because they are your child, and you always kind of view them that way.
Yeah, I can imagine that, right? It's like once you've changed someone's diaper for a bunch of years and you fed them everything, you probably always sort of have that vision of them in your mind.
And it's hard when they come in and try to change things. Like, I'm really pushing to try to go paperless and things like that, and the resistance is tough, and I have to respect the fact that, like, they brought us here. They built this and made this a successful. I might think I know better, but you still got to respect. You got to respect the owners, and that can be hard sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt. Listen, as someone who's owned businesses and owns one now, it is tough. And I think, sometimes, the thing that I think is hard to understand if you haven't built something, literally from scratch, is how personal it can get and how much your own identity can get sort of like tied up into it. And we talked about it a little bit before. I feel like these types of transitions are probably 80 or 90% like psychological.
Oh, absolutely.
Way more than tactical, or,
You can always figure out money. You can always figure out dividing things. It's that giving up of the, you built this. It is your baby. You've put probably more blood, sweat, and tears into it than anything else in your life. And we finally gotten my dad to a point where he's off the shop floor. He's stopping helping, as we like to call it, with production. He comes in for lunch. We all go out to lunch together. He sits down, does some stuff on the computer. Usually we encourage him to go golf. And it works great, though, because he's now at a point where he trusts us that we got it. Yeah. And, 5 years ago, that trust wasn't there. So, we're making baby steps, and I think it's really, really, we're on our way.
I sort of have this sense that you thought about taking those baby steps, and you had some tactics that you put into place to sort of earn that trust, right? Like, I think you alluded to it, but it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's not going to be one day, they're in full time, and the next day they're just coming in for lunch and golf. So I'm just curious, what were some of the steps you thought of taking to build some of that trust and confidence?
I think it was, just the years of proving that the business is doing well, right? We had this huge reshoring project that we spent millions of dollars and thousands of hours working on, and that was an all hands on deck situation. That was actually the production line I ran when it first came over. So that was just years of stress and engineering and just planning and trying to figure it out as we go. Our unofficial company motto is failing upwards. We're learning from our mistakes constantly. And I think that through that process, he learned that, like, we can do this. We can figure this out. We make smart decisions. We don't always make the right decision. But I think that, like, process of trial and error and team building and working together really helped him have confidence in myself and my brother-in-law. So
sort of, that's interesting. So, like, seeing not just the outcomes, not just saying, hey, trust me, but actually walking him through the thought process, a little bit of like seeing how the sausage is made. And when you start to see how somebody thinks and how they get to good decisions, then you start to just have confidence in their decision making, which is more important than any one decision.
Yep. And I think it's a lot about the approach too. It's rather than being like, well, I don't think you're right, and how you're approaching it. Listening, learning, and then making the changes based off of how he's done business or what he wants, right? Like, okay, you want to try it this way? Let's try, bending the handle this way. I don't think it's going to work, but let's give it a shot. And then from that, you learn and you can kind of make decisions. It's easier with data than with, just like, you're wrong for this, and this reasons. And that goes both ways. It's just not shooting down anybody's ideas. It's kind of developing a mutual respect and knowing that we care. Yeah.
Oh, that's really smart. Yeah. You touched on something which I do want to talk about is the reshoring, which, talked about that a few years ago, with Paul, and it was earlier in the stages of doing that. So just maybe share with the audience a little bit, just maybe start back from the beginning. What happened that we've needed to think about reshoring, and just maybe walk us through that.
Sure. So in about 2013, 2014, my dad actually decided to bring our parts back from overseas. So in the early 2000s, we had to take basically an entire product line and send it to China. We did not want to do this. We were a USA-made company, but margins were just too tight. We did not have a choice. It was sink or swim. We go overseas or we don't survive. So we made the strategic decision to go over to China. But my dad, being that he's now stepping a little bit away from the business, consumes a huge amount of media and was keeping an eye on the things that were happening in China, where a lot of the subsidies were set to expire. And he just saw the writing on the wall that China prices were going to start to rise. So he decided to invest in bringing parts back to the U.S. So we invested, it was $5 million. We got a bunch of different machines. So we have a combo laser punch machine, a fiber laser, we have now 3 pneumatic benders that we all use to make our parts. And so we went through a huge engineering tactic of bringing back thousands of parts to make them here. It took us years. I think we got our first machine in end of 2014, and it took us till halfway through 2016 to completely stop purchasing our first part from overseas. So it was a lot of work, but we got there, and it was really, really exciting. Some of the things that we found from that, though, is, everybody said they wanted USA made, but not when it was necessarily more expensive. That's kind of the pre-pandemic world that we lived in, was we were offering these USA made parts, but we found that we were still getting undercut by overseas, and it didn't matter that it was USA made necessarily. Some people it did, but not everybody. But that was kind of the struggle where we had it. And then the pandemic hit, and lead times changed, and parts from China were, instead of being 12 to 16 weeks, were now 6 months to a year to get over. And we had the parts. And it became a lead time issue, not a price issue. So we actually were very, very lucky, and it was not that COVID was a good thing, but our pre-planning really helped us be set up to provide parts to the country, domestically, because we had the capabilities to do it. I mean, reshoring is incredibly expensive. We were super lucky that because we started here being USA made, Southington Tool, which is one of our component suppliers, actually had kept all of our original tooling from when we had parts being made.
I was going to ask you about that.
So we probably saved $250,000 in tooling because we were able to go back to them, and we would send them prints and be like, well, it's a little different than what we have. And be like, oh, you have this? No, just make it to that. We'll fix it on our end. We got so lucky in that. And not every company or most companies aren't set up to do that. We started reshoring 6 years before the pandemic. And it took us up until that point to really be solid in our manufacturing process. So it was quite the journey.
The journey, yeah.
Yeah.
And so looking back on it now, I mean, obviously it was successful given all the stuff that happened from a lead time perspective, but sort of looking forward, do you believe that it will continue to be successful? Like, what do you see as sort of the future of that big reshoring effort that you did?
So what we're seeing right now is a little bit of a shift back. So we're now getting more pushback on prices. Not as bad, but not as bad as it used to. So it used to be, oh, you're 4 cents higher than China, but it's USA made. No, we're still going to China. We get a little bit more of a grace period now because we are USA made. So I think there is a greater value in parts being made in the US. As far as where it goes in the future, we'll have to see. I do think one of the things that will be very interesting is, with the model-based definition and the digital thread that's now coming down from the DoD and in the aerospace community, is that I think there will probably be a little bit more push for USA made because it's going to be a little bit easier to track the supply chain and those requirements. Because, sometimes the USA made can be a little, certain parts can be made domestically, certain parts can't. And so I think that kind of technology advancement is hopefully going to increase the value in parts made here. So.
What do you see about sort of price divergence? Because I think there's been, I mean, there's some thoughts around prices are rising overseas, the cost of transportation, and then the lead time delays. There's a cost associated with all that, and sort of supply chain resiliency. Some of those things are more theoretical, so or they show up theoretically on paper or in the overall cost, but you don't see it in the purchase order. But of course, transportation costs and increasing costs overseas, you would see in the purchase order. I wonder, and here we've got, you've talked about lasers and different like automated machines, so that can help reduce costs here. Do you see the spread of overseas and US made staying the same, getting narrower, getting bigger?
I think hopefully getting narrower. It's tough I don't have a lot of insight on exactly what's going on overseas because we're not really in touch with it as much anymore, other than what we're hearing from what our competitors are. We just got undercut by, somebody was offering the same part for $3 less than us the other day. And that's,
that's a lot.
That's a lot. And, we asked, well, is this other part made in the US and is that important to you? And, we'll see, and it's just that. It's just where it sits right now. I think, the tricky part is on material. So obviously during the pandemic, material was incredibly volatile. It was going up and going down. We'd get quotes and being like, you can buy this today at this price, or I can quote you this price, and it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 months. Now we're seeing raw materials kind of steady, still higher than what it was. But that's kind of that's usually one of our biggest expenses and our biggest expenditure difference within when we're going against what we pay overseas is raw material.
Cost of the raw material.
Raw material is still high, and then labor's going to be higher.
Labor's going to be higher, yeah.
And Connecticut's not a low cost state on top of it, but we're able to, because of how we manufacture, we're able to kind of mitigate that a little bit because we have one operator operating multiple machines, so it makes it a little bit easier to kind of cut down on that. But
let me look. There's no question that the U.S. and certainly in the Northeast, you're going to need to find automation and ways to cut down on labor. But I was actually a little surprised that you said the materials cost was such a differentiator.
That's to the best of our knowledge. Yeah, it's not. It hasn't. It has not gone back to pre-pandemic numbers, and material was our biggest kind of expense pre-pandemic also. So I think that's. It just is what it is. I don't think it's necessarily, I don't know how much it's affecting our business. Again, we're just starting to see a lot of this pushback on parts that are also made overseas. So we're going to kind of see what happens with it.
Got to keep on keeping on, right? Always learning, always pivoting. So aside from that, like kind of what else is in the future for Carey Manufacturing?
So our next kind of plan is to actually go out and try to get business. One of the things about the way our company is built is we're basically a catalog house that does custom parts on request. So we'll get a print of something like similar but different to what we make, and we'll price it and make it. The one thing we haven't really done, or at least haven't done in a decade since I've been there, is really gone out and actively tried to seek new work. So our next plan is to kind of go out, start going to trade shows, start being involved in that community and seeing what parts we can make that we don't know that we can make, getting new OEM customers, getting people that are looking for parts that can maybe be made just slightly differently or that they can't just buy off the shelf because our parts are mostly commercial off the shelf. You can buy a lot of the stuff that we make at Home Depot. I mean, McMaster-Carr is our biggest customer. So, we're really looking for that kind of little bit different type of business that allows us to make it because of the way we machine and manufacture. We don't have heavy tooling charges. Something that would normally cost $10,000 in tooling to another manufacturer, we can actually do for free because of the way we manufacture.
Got it. So try and leverage your know-how, not to just continue to make the stuff that you've been making, but maybe find other opportunities.
Yeah, that's kind of our new.
And that's going to be your job.
We're going to add it to the list, yeah.
And what do you think about that?
I'm actually very excited to do that. It's kind of an area that I enjoy working with people. I enjoy the creative part of it, but I'm not an engineer. They don't let me touch the machines I've asked. And so it's nice to kind of be part of that because kind of taking the step back and doing more of the QA and the outreach, I've taken a step back from the shop floor, and I really miss that engaging part of it, of actually being able to touch the parts and inspect and problem solve and be part of that. So
that's great. Well, listen, I think you're going to be really good at it. I mean, you're definitely like engaging. You've got really, really positive energy and a curiosity, which I think are the key items to be successful, at least in my experience, in sort of that business development role. So I think you got a bright future in that. Well, Alison, I'm going to wrap it up, ask you a few last questions.
Sure.
First one I wanted to ask you is if you had to do something other than be vice president of Carey Manufacturing, what would you do?
Something with food. I love to cook. I absolutely love to cook. I'm actually having 30 of my closest friends over tomorrow for a Friendsgiving. I wouldn't want to be a chef, but something in that kind of food world.
Well, since you brought up, I'm going to ask what will be on the menu for a 30-person Friendsgiving?
So I just picked up the turkey this morning, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy. I'm making family recipe Italian wedding soup. That is always a big hit.
Yep.
And yeah, I've got a list of about, I don't know, probably 15 things. I'll probably make 10 of them.
So it's a very traditional Friendsgiving menu, though. Listen, I love it. We actually aren't doing it this year, but we have done like a Friendsgiving almost every year for many years, and I like the traditional approach too, which means I end up having 2 Thanksgiving dinners, which is like totally fine with me.
I get to make everything I like the way I like to make it, so that's why I do it.
Exactly, and not only that, like I love the leftover Thanksgiving stuff, and when we didn't have the Friendsgiving, where like going to either my parents or my in-laws, and then you don't really get like any leftovers, so you don't get the day after Thanksgiving sandwich, which is like such an important part of Thanksgiving. So what's something, Alison, that you think you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
Don't give up and fight. I think I've had to fight for a lot in my life. I've always felt like I've had to fight to be heard, and for better or worse, that has served me. But I think that has given me kind of some persistence and some ability of not knowing when to shut up. And I think sometimes it's actually served me better than not.
Yeah, absolutely. Grit is everything. What's something that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you could go back and tell young Alison, and if young Alison would listen to you, you think it'd really make a positive impact on her life?
You can do it. Don't freak out. Take a deep breath and pick one thing at a time.
Really? Was that, did you have that sort of can't stick to it thing and like psych yourself out early on?
Yeah, it's the practice makes you better. It was one of those things that like if I didn't come off and feel like I could do it perfectly or do it well right off the bat, I would just drop it or I would get overwhelmed. I have anxiety, and that is something that can be really debilitating if you're afraid to fail and if you're afraid to make mistakes, then you're just going to paralyze yourself and be able to do anything. And right now with wearing all the hats I do, you can get to paralysis in that. So taking a breath, taking a break, and then just focusing, and you're good.
It makes all the difference.
It makes all the difference.
I think that's really strong advice. Alison, thank you so much for coming on. It was really a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.